What would you say if I told you that many of the most famous Final Fantasy tracks composed by Nobuo Uematsu, arguably one of the best video game composers of all time, were all written using one simple trick, and it's a trick that you could use to write music yourself? Sound dubious? Well, check it out. One of the golden rules of the universe is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
Basically, overcomplicating something rarely yields a better result, and it definitely makes it more prone to failure. Look at some of the most iconic video games. Mario, at its core, can be boiled down to running and jumping. Same with Sonic. Replace jumping with a sword and you've got Zelda. Replace the sword with some sort of block and you've got Minecraft. Replace the block with a gun and you've got any and all first-person shooters. The point is this: you don't need an extraordinarily complex idea to start making something, and generally speaking, the simpler the idea, the better. That doesn't mean you can't add bells and whistles and frills afterwards, but the basic premise should be, keep it simple, stupid. If you want to talk about the most iconic game music, while simultaneously talking about the most straightforward game music, very few tracks can compete with the prelude, or crystal theme, from Final Fantasy. By now, the legend of its composition is pretty well known. The director of the game contacted Uematsu late in Final Fantasy's development, realizing they'd forgotten to come up with a track for the title screen. Uematsu reportedly wrote it in 10 minutes, probably never dreaming that it would become one of the most recognizable pieces of video game music ever. Since its inception, it's gone through a lot of evolution and additions, appearing in pretty much every Final Fantasy game to date. But let's look at the original version and figure out how Uematsu came up with such a beautiful tune in such a short amount of time. First, some musical context. In Western common practice, there are a handful of scales composers typically choose from, but among those, the most commonly used are major and minor, with major probably being the more prevalent. A major scale is made up of 7 tones that span from one pitch to the same pitch an octave higher, and the distances between the pitches are a mix of whole and half steps. Of these 7 pitches, there are 3 that are considered most important and stable, 1, 3, and 5, and the repeated 1 an octave higher often get included as well. If you stack these 3 pitches, you get what is referred to as a tonic triad. This is the chord you can play under a melody to help people hear the key of the music, and is often heard at the beginning and end to give you context. It's what allows our ear to hear a home pitch, or tonic. But chords are a function of harmony, not melody. Harmony is music arranged vertically, where the notes happen simultaneously, and melody is music arranged horizontally, where the notes happen sequentially. If you made a melody out of our tonic triad by spreading them horizontally, you would end up with an arpeggio. But an arpeggio, while technically melodic, still mostly represents a harmonic structure because of how stable those 3 notes are in the scale. If we want to make a convincing melody, we need to incorporate melodic motion. There are 4 types of melodic motion, describing how notes move from one to another. The first is repeat, which sort of doesn't count because it more accurately describes the lack of motion. The second is step, which is motion from one pitch to an adjacent pitch in the scale. The third is skip, which is motion between 2 pitches with only 1 pitch between them. The fourth type is leap, which is motion between one note to another note at least 2 pitches away. If we want to apply these types of melodic motion to our arpeggio, leaving out repeats, we only need to add in the second note. This results in a step, a skip, and a leap, and it sounds like this. Starting to sound familiar? If you repeat this pattern over several octaves, you end up with the Final Fantasy prelude. After going up and coming back down, all Uematsu does is shift the whole pattern down 3 notes and do it again. Starting on this pitch outlines the minor scale using the same pattern, which gives us a different sort of sound. Ultimately, he just moves this pattern around a bit more, then includes a couple different types of arpeggios at the very end, but overall it is a very simple composition. Now for the trick. The prelude leans heavily on this motion rising out of 1, 2, 3, and it must have been inspiring because Uematsu uses this 1, 2, 3 motion to initiate many of the iconic Final Fantasy tracks he wrote. Is it really as simple as 1, 2, 3? Well, no, of course not, and Uematsu's genius certainly shines through in what comes after those initial notes. What happens after the third note is what really sets the mood emotionally for the track and the scene, and Uematsu is a master at capturing the essence of the characters and the world through his music. But it is fun to think about how straightforward the beginning of each of these melodies actually is. Now for a music theory bonus round. Look at the intervals between pitches 1, 2, and 3, 2 whole steps. If you invert this pattern, meaning flip it upside down, you would have 2 whole steps descending from 1 instead of ascending, and that would use these pitches instead. Ring a bell? How about now? Yes, the famous Final Fantasy victory theme is in fact just an inverse of the opening of the prelude. Who knew that when he wrote those first 3 notes of the prelude in those 10 minutes, Nobuo Uematsu would actually be paving the way for decades of incredible, inspiring, and iconic music that would continue to captivate fans for generations. And of course, if you haven't already caught it, the Final Fantasy victory theme was the inspiration for the music for this channel too. So thanks for watching, leave a comment with your thoughts and ideas for more videos, and I'll see you next time.